Hello and welcome to the Baseball Wisconsin podcast. I am your host, Tim Gotzler. All right, so we made it to the second inning of Game 2. And today's guest is head baseball coach at Waukesha West High School, Chad Montez. Now, Coach Montez is a 2018 WBCA Hall of Fame inductee. He was a former president of the association. In his 20-plus years at West, he's amassed a record of 410 and 309. He's been named District Coach of the Year twice. He's led the Wolverines to 7 conference championships, 10 sectional appearances, and 8 trips to the state tournament. In this episode, Chad unpacks the tradition and the core values and the vision of Wolverine baseball, his time as a player and a coach, growing up and coming back to the city of Waukesha, some of the best teams that he's had. I was on the backside of some of those losses as a player and a coach when I was at Catholic Memorial myself. And I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Before we get started, just want to remind you to subscribe and share. You'll get notifications when new episodes are released. And I really appreciate you sharing the show with other coaches. Without further ado, head baseball coach at Waukesha West High School, Chad Montez. Hey, Coach, how you doing today?
Good, Tim. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be with you and talking baseball, which you and I have talked a lot of baseball over the years, but it's nice to kind of put it some substance here with the podcast.
Yeah, and I appreciate you coming on. And, I've known you for a long time. But for our listeners, why don't you tell us just about your background? Where are you from? How'd you grow up in baseball and everything else? So where did it start for you?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Waukesha, Wisconsin. I went to Waukesha Public Schools. I graduated from Waukesha South in 1988. And at that time, there were only 2 high schools, public high schools, South and North at that time, because where I'm currently coaching at Waukesha West, that school didn't open till the fall of 93. So born and raised in Waukesha, grew up playing baseball. Youth baseball is not what it is today. At that time, we had park and rec baseball where any kid could just sign up and play. And then on top of that, the only 2 kind of club kind of teams or travel teams at that point were the Waukesha Blazers and Wisconsin Centrifugal. Wisconsin Centrifugal eventually morphed for those Waukesha people into RTE Chargers, and then eventually Cooper Chargers. And then I think maybe that was kind of where things started to dabble in when the Firebirds came in and things like that. So that's where I'm from. And then I've been teaching in the Waukesha School District. I got hired in the summer of 1994. And I started off as a classroom teacher. I taught for 18 years. And then now I'm in my 9th year as dean of students at a middle school. And so I've been in the district 27 years. And that's kind of my professional side. As far as baseball side, after playing high school baseball at Waukesha South, I was blessed enough to play at UW-Whitewater. So I was a freshman in the fall of '88 and got to be a part of the 1989 World Series team. At that point, and you're seeing a little bit more of this college level in some parts of the country, but at that time when I was playing, there was a JV college team as well as kind of what the varsity, as we know, is like the active roster in this day and age. And I played JV, and I had a really good JV baseball season my first year in college. And then I was blessed to ask by Coach Jim Miller to move up and be with the kind of the varsity team, for the postseason. And I had no idea. I knew they were very good, but all of a sudden here we are. They ended up making it to the College World Series, and that was a once in a lifetime experience because how many people get that opportunity. And one of our main players on the team was Wisconsin native Bob Wickman, and Bob played with the Yankees, White Sox, and had spent some time with the Brewers. So he was like one of our starting pitchers, and that was a pretty cool experience. And John Vodenlich, the head coach at Whitewater currently, was actually on that team, and we were actually roommates for the World Series as far as hotel and that whole postseason run. So it was pretty cool. And then I got into coaching. I actually started coaching baseball before I started teaching. So my first job, I got offered a position by Bob Hall, who is a Waukesha guy, was a North graduate, but he took actually the South job in the summer. It would have been the summer of '94. And then he was there for only 1 year. And then the Waukesha North position opened up, and he returned to North, his alma mater, to coach. So I got to coach as a head freshman coach my first year in '94, and then 2 years as Bob's varsity assistant, one of his assistants at Waukesha North in '96, '97. And then I interviewed for the West job in the fall of '97, and then I got the position for the '98 season. One little twist on it that most people don't know, kind of a fun fact, I guess you could say, is I actually had interviewed twice for the West position. So I actually had interviewed after it would have been the '95 season. I interviewed and I did not get the position. It might have been '96 now that I think of it, because Todd Froworth got the position for one season. And then Todd, who we later have become friends after that, resigned after 1 year. And then I re-interviewed and got it a second time. So kind of a fun little story. But yeah, that's how I got my career started at West. And this next year, 2021, will be my 24th year as the head coach at West.
Wow. Now, before we get in your coaching career, I want to know what type of player you were. Give me the scouting report. Warhawk. I feel like all I got is Warhawks on this show anyways. So I got to hear more about your playing career.
Yeah. So I guess, in high school, kind of my nature, and this kind of gets into my family a little bit. So my grandfather, who's been deceased, he died in 2003, but he was like the first Montez baseball coach, and he has a pretty fascinating story. So he was born in Italy, Texas, and my grandfather never went to school a day in his life. He was a migrant worker. That his family, they just started working in the fields, which seems pretty crazy, in this time, I feel blessed to, have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, but like 2 generations ago, my grandfather never went to school a day in his life. My grandmother was born in Mexico City, and they moved here during the Depression from Texas to Green Bay for work. And they lived, in a household of family with cousins and aunts and uncles in Green Bay, and worked, and then eventually moved to Waukesha, where my dad was born. So they did that all in the Depression. So my grandfather it was like the first baseball coach. I have, pictures of him coaching at Frame Park, and I don't know a ton of details about it because my dad wasn't sure on a ton of details, but he did coach and spent a lot of time with baseball. And then my dad did coached in youth, and then it came to me. So me as a player is pretty similar, not too far away from me as a coach. I was just kind of, to use, terminology that we use today, but back then, I just would outwork people. I wasn't a big person, and, in high school, I think I graduated my senior year in high school at 5'7" or 5'8", and I was like 140 pounds wringing wet. So I was definitely not a physical specimen by any means, but I was really, really strong. I worked really, really hard in the weight room. And, I was just kind of that grinder. When I tell my players today that, like, I used to hit off a batting tee in the backyard for like hours, they would say like, no, you didn't do that, because you just put the ball on the tee and you just hit and you hit. And it wasn't like, now we might have to have 10 different drills to keep the attention spans focused in, but I just hit. And I just grew up playing wiffle ball or strikeout, just all those throwback games that you did as a kid. Because I always tell my players that, if we stayed in the house, mom was going to give us chores to do. You're going to do work, or you found a way to, like, all right, I'm going to do as few chores as I can possibly do and get outside and play and just to play outside, like literally play outside, from 9 a.m. And maybe you came home for lunch some days, maybe you didn't, but then you did come home from supper when the front porch light was on. That was your signal to come home, but then you tried to get back out in the evening and play, kick the can or something else. And, those things, I just grew up playing all the time. And I just would outwork people, because I felt like, I can't control my God-given ability. I can't control, my size, but I can control how I work. And, that's just what I did. And I don't think I was that, I didn't think it through that much as a kid or as a player. This is what I had to do, and I just did it. And I knew if I wanted to play college baseball, which was a goal of mine, as a middle schooler, high schooler, I just had to work. And, the other thing I spent a ton of time doing is just throwing the ball up against the garage, and just, you'd play your own games in your head, because there weren't a ton of kids in my neighborhood that were my age. So I just threw the ball up against the garage and simulated games. And, that made me a really, really good all-around player, just fielding ground balls without even really think of, like, I didn't feel like I was working. I was just playing. And so that's kind of how I grew up. So that would be me as a player. I just worked as hard as I could, and played to the highest level I could, which I was fortunate enough to play at Whitewater. And Whitewater at that time was very good, but it wasn't what it is today. Like today, I always say, like, if I graduated now with the same talent and the same everything that I graduated high school with in '88, could I play at Whitewater today? And I don't know if I could. I mean, the talent has gotten so good that it's like, I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's like, you'd like to think, I think I could, but in reality, if you look at it objectively, I don't know, that they're pretty talented now.
What's amazing hearing you tell that story, like, it's like the all-American dream, right? Grandfather comes here, migrant worker, move across the country, the Depression, a couple generations later, kids are playing outside, kick the can, streetlights come on. I mean, master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, working in education. Like, that's a really powerful story. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Now, looking into your coaching career, and you talked about as a player and as an early coach, like, who would you put on, like, your top coaching influences, right? It's the old sports talk radio question, your Mount Rushmore of guys. And I want to highlight a few people, but also, what did you learn from those coaches?
Yeah, I mean, I would put it more in groups instead of individual people. So I guess, the first group would be my grandfather and dad, and they just didn't put into me, like, the fun of the game. Like, they inspired me to, it is a game, like, have fun, and you can be passionate about it, and you can be serious about it, but at the end of it, it is a game, So I would say my grandfather and dad, so they're Thomas Montez Sr. and Thomas Montez Jr. So that would be one group. And then my high school football coach and high school baseball coach, I guess I would put as, like, my second group. Coach Jeff Trickey, which is a legendary, Hall of Fame football coach. And everyone has heard of, like, the Trickey, football quarterback camps. And Coach Trickey was awesome. I was not a spectacular football player by any means. I was really fast and really quick, and I was strong for my body type, but I was a receiver. To be honest, I didn't like to get hit. So I would try to run as fast and quick as I could. And, if I could get out of bounds, I was getting out of bounds. I was not putting my shoulder down or head down to gain those extra few yards. But Coach Trickey was like the coach you wanted to be. And even though I knew I wasn't going to be necessarily a football coach, I knew that I could even then because I knew I wanted to coach baseball then. It was weird, my path to coach, I knew at a young age, and I don't know why I know this. I mean, it was just God's blessing. It was just, I knew that I wanted to play baseball at the highest level I could play, and then coach. And so I even knew in high school I was taking lessons from Coach Tricky, how he just ran a team, how he practiced, because I knew I would use that someday. And then my high school baseball coach, Fritz Richter, I mean, he was old school, tough as they could come, like there was no messing around. And that kind of gave me the discipline. So those high school coaches really set the foundation of who I was as a coach. And then my college coach, Jim Miller, the thing that he taught me is that players are people, because sometimes as coaches, and I probably made this mistake as a young coach, is you tend to, it's about scheme, it's about this drill, it's about how can I get better, and those are all good things. But Coach Miller, his saying would be, it's not always about the X's and O's, it's about the Jimmies and Joes. And he taught me that it's not just winning, and it's not just this drill or that drill, or how I can do this better. It's that they are people, and that's kind of a life skill as well.
Oh, yeah, Coach Miller, and he's been mentioned here a few times, and the tree of his leadership has really extended across the state. And you've been a head coach for 20 something years now. Okay, so you've built so much of your own legacy, whether you want to admit it or not, right? Hall of Fame, all the titles, conference championships. Obviously, you had a tremendous influence on baseball in the city of Waukesha, which I grew up in. You talk about the Blazers and the Firebirds, and it's just funny. It brings me back to those days. But bring us into just into West baseball. I know you spend so much time and have spent so much time cultivating an environment that you're proud of, and it's a 12-month-a-year job for you. So give us the 30,000-foot view of West baseball.
Yeah, great question. And I guess if I take back to when I first got the job. So as I said earlier, my first round of interviews, I didn't get the position, and then a year later, I was blessed to then get the position. So when I went in there, at that time, West High School had zero success in baseball, and I was a young coach. I got hired. I was about 27 years old, and you had that mentality, I want to prove myself, I want to prove that they made the right decision, because and I can see this now. Maybe at the time I didn't. All right, I didn't get the job the first time, which I was kind of heartbroken, and I was kind of upset, and oh, what did I do wrong? So then when you do get the position, you're like, okay, now I gotta show them. I gotta show them they made the right choice. And so you as a young coach, you're trying to do everything well, and I think that's okay. I mean, that's a good goal to have, but you slowly learn that you can't do everything. You can't coach pitchers, catchers, infielders, outfielders. That you have to have a really quality staff. And in high school baseball, staffs, you're not fortunate always to have someone there for 10, 15, 20 years. You might have someone there for 2-3 years, and then they become a head coach, or they have to do other things. So just trying to maintain that progress of always trying to improve. And West baseball, we were blessed. My first few years we struggled, but showed signs of improvement. I remember the first year, and I'm kind of a stats person, as you know. I remember that first year we only had 9 wins, and at that time as a young coach, you're thinking 9 wins, oh, that's terrible, but now when I look back, you set some foundation stuff in place that first year that then helped with year 2, year 3, and so on. Because year 2, we had gone up to 17 wins. And then my third year, we had the first winning record ever in West history. So I thought, okay, things are going in the right direction. And then year 4, we were below 500 again, but we had a pretty young team, a pretty oh, these kids could have a promising future that were, freshmen and sophomores. And then year 5, all of a sudden things kind of clicked. And that was 2002. And some names you'll recognize in there. So that would have been when Nick Wixer, Nick Rainwater, Greg Harder, they were juniors that year. And then we had Adam Dominic, who would have been a sophomore that year. And then we had some pretty good senior players as well. And all of a sudden things started to come together, and we won our first conference championship. And then, things got kind of on a roll. For a 10-year period, we won 7 conference championships and went to the state summer tournament 8 times from 2002 to 2012. And you're like, wow, this is awesome. We were never cocky or arrogant about it. We were always all right, let's just keep maintaining this. And then after the 2012 season, things just changed, and we haven't won a conference championship or been to the state tournament since. And it's what did you learn in that time? And, it comes down to, you have to have a high level of players. And, you can't control that at the high school level. I mean, sometimes for those 10 years, you thought, well, these kids graduated and these other kids came in and, they're really, really talented, because we had so many great players over time, that it was just one after another. And, we were blessed. And, now I look back and gosh, that was pretty cool and pretty amazing, because sometimes you can only maintain that for 2, 3, 4 years. And then you kind of hit a cycle where we're just not as good as far as on paper conference or state worthy. But I mean, since 2012, we've probably worked as hard, and they're constantly improving. I always feel you can learn as a coach. I'm always trying to learn more stuff, and I'm a veteran coach now, right? I'm the old coach, so it's I try not to fall in the trap of this is how I did things, back when I got hired, and there's some still staples of it, but I'm always trying to improve, and how can I do better? How can I improve as a teacher, coach, and a leader? But then also kind of remember what Coach Miller said is that, you got to remember that they're kids, they're people, and, they're 16, 17, and 18 years old. And we're putting a lot of pressures and demands on them from all aspects of their life. And to get them to be better people are kind of some of my more goals now. Because if you look back when I started, I kind of laugh at it. I mean, it's I had a rule, I had all these rules, a list of rules, and I had everything defined, because that's what Ron Polk said to do. He was the head coach at Mississippi State, and I just kind of followed that tool, and it was good because it was effective at the time. But now if you look at our rules, really our program model right now is it's about we, not me, which if you really break down that statement, there's a lot there. It's about we, not me. And then we have 2 standards. We don't have a list of rules anymore. One is to give back to others selflessly in our actions, and 2, work every day to become the best teammate that I can be. So that's kind of where we're at now. But I guess that would be a little bit of the history of West baseball since I started back there.
I appreciate that. And again, I was part of a lot of that on the player end and coaching end, especially a 10-year run. But when we zoom in on, we over me, you said it means a lot of things. Break that down for us. What does that mean to you? Obviously that I know you hold that close to your chest, and it means a lot to you, and because you represent your program. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. And I think players have evolved a lot. So I guess, what does it mean to our program? When I first got to West, the type of player we had, whether they were talented or not, taking skill out of it, they were the type of kids that you just told them do this, and they did it. It was just do this, and we're working towards this result. And now I think kids need to, know more of the why. And I think that's good. I mean, they're questioning. They want to know, why does this make me better? So it's about we, not me, as a society, whether we like it or not. And I'm one of those people, like, control what we can, not what we can't, right? So society is what it is, and it's a very, it's a very selfish society. We're concerned about our own kids a lot of times. So when you break down, it's about we and not me, it's kind of getting at that, like, I'm going to put my performance, like, yes, I want to perform well going to the field today, but if I end up 0 for 4 and we win, that's about the we part and not me. And that's really hard for kids. I'd say probably in the last, I would say, Tim, probably in the last 5 to 6 years, somewhere in there, because as good of things that club and travel ball give us from a competition standpoint, and what I can be seen as a player, and I can promote my skills to a lot of college people in the big settings. We always joke in our program, and like, this would never happen, but like we always say, if you went 4 for 4 and you hit like 4 home runs and lost, or you went 0 for 4 and struck out 4 times looking, but won, which one would you rather have? And, everyone knows what the correct answer is. Like, it should be about the team winning, but that's really a challenge for youth kids, middle school kids, high school kids now, because in showcases, everything is a time, everything is a benchmark. And if I want to play at the next level, sometimes the perception is that I need to meet all those benchmarks, and we kind of get lost about that, and we get focused on ourselves, like, what did I do? So that's where we try to dig a little deeper with players. And for me, it's like, it's second nature. It's like, I don't have to think about it, because this is how I kind of grew up. However, now, it's much different, because things are so much focused. Everyone has a Twitter account, an Instagram, and within seconds you can shoot out a highlight reel of your whole high school baseball, football, basketball season. So it's a balancing act, because all those things have a place and a purpose, but it's just kind of getting kids to, like, push that all the way. And, like, at the end of the day, at the end of the season, when it's game time, it's just going to be about us, we, the team, the group of coaches that year, and the group of players. And if we can give back to others, like give to your teammates and work every day to become the best teammate, at the end of it, if we can do those things now as a coach, I feel like we did what we were supposed to do. And if we got beat, we got beat. If the other team was better, if we made some mistakes, then we can learn from that, from the physical side. But it really comes down to, at the end, like, how are we for each other?
Thanks for breaking that down. Now, within West baseball as well, like, give us some of that secret sauce. Give us some of the things that maybe makes your program unique over others. And maybe that means others don't do it at all, or something you guys do really well.
Yeah. I guess the one thing I'd like to feel like that we do as well, or as well as anyone, is how we practice, the physical side. Because I feel like I'm very detailed. I post the practice plan for the players, which can have pros and cons to it, because they sometimes, I feel like you have to kind of watch that a little bit, because sometimes if you post it all the time, then they're just looking at, like, the end result and not concentrating on the moment at the present. So you got to be careful of that a little bit. But a very detailed practice is, like, not a lot of wasted reps. Like, I don't like guys standing around, so if we're working on base running, instead of one person running the bases, can we have like 4 or 5 lines of base running, or, tee work, or bunting work, or whatever the skill is? Let's try to get as multiple reps as possible. And obviously you need to have the coaches to do that. But if you're doing outfield drills, instead of, like, you're doing one specific drill, whatever it is, can you break that down and now have two of those groups going, so you just can maximize reps? So just utilizing practice time, and also like really working hard, like trying not to take reps off. getting back to when I was a kid, I could hit off the tee for a long time, trying to get that message across to players. Like, come on, we got to work through these things. Like, if you need a break, we need water, but we got to keep repping, and we got to get our work in. And then the other part, I guess, like your secret sauce question, I was blessed or fortunate enough early on in my career, like in probably late 90s, early 2000s, to start kind of getting into the mental side of the game. And I actually got to hear some pretty good mental guys over the years speak, like Brian Kane, you had mentioned. I actually got to hear him speak in Heartland, Wisconsin. At that time, there was a Next Level in Wisconsin base there before they moved to Waukesha. And he spoke there before he was like as big as he is now. And then guys like Steve Springer, Ken Reviza, who's probably like the godfather in the mental side of the game. So just performance coaches, the mental side, like developing routines. And we do spend time at practices working on the mental side, because I believe in all of us, and I even do this as a 51-year-old, is we have, the voice of confidence in our head and the voice of doubt. And whether we're doing something like a sport or activity ourselves, or we're about to give a speech, or I just taught a lesson, we have either the voice of confidence or the voice of doubt. And sometimes one voice is louder than the others, and we all have it. And trying to talk to players about that you have to have positive self-talk to yourself. Like, I am a good hitter. I'm going to hit the ball hard. Does that always mean 100% of the time I'm going to do that? No, of course not. But just getting kids to have that positive self-talk. And I try to get them now to take it a step further and translate that to their life. Like, because I tell them, like, there'll be times throughout the day that I have to tell myself, like, this is the right thing to do. I am a good leader. I can do this, because we all have that doubt or lack of confidence in our head from time to time. So that whole mental side, I guess that's the part of the game that I think if there was like a secret sauce, it's not a secret sauce because so many people do it now. But I think when we started it, I feel like we were one of the first to kind of explore it a little bit more. And sometimes kids don't completely get it at 16, 17 years old. Some get it more than others, but whatever you can adapt for each individual, I think is important. And getting them to use the mental side of the game to benefit them, not only in baseball, but in life.
Funny you say that, because, obviously over the years, I've gotten to know some of your former players and gotten to know you well. And I remember playing at your place, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, and seeing little green light stickers on bats. And, like, as I like get a bat off the on deck circle, I'm like, what is that? And I remember thinking throughout the game, like, you guys were into, green lights, red lights, yellow lights years before it was trendy, and I think something with the mental game too, that it's easy to say, yeah, we're going to do this. It's easy to say, yeah, it's important to us. The game is X% mental, but to systematically put it in your program is something else. Because, right, some people think, well, it takes time away from infield drills, takes time away from bunting drills. Is this really worth the investment? So I'm really glad you went into that. The other thing I wanted to touch on is your practice planning. So how do you, what's a skeleton practice plan look like? Do you do it throughout the day? Do you guys work as a coaching staff through a common document? Like, how do you guys practice plan?
Yeah, good question. So I, as kind of the head coach, for day one of practice. So after tryouts are done, we've made it through tryouts. We have our team now. What do we want to focus on? And if we have the luxury of this, because now I've coached in the summer season as well as the spring, the start of everything has to be with pitching and catching, because I feel like the person you put out on the mound or the person you put behind the plate are involved in every single play, and their ability to throw consistent strikes is really going to dictate how the game goes. And I don't care if the kid throws 70 miles an hour or 85 miles an hour, but if we can consistently throw strikes and force the team to put the ball in play, typically good things are gonna happen for you. So everything starts with pitching, catching. So we try to have that as a component of every practice. Is it 100% of the time? No, but pitching and catching in every practice. So those must be there. And then if you take it back a step from that, if it's truly about pitching and catching, you could just say throwing and catching. I mean, throwing and catching is such a simple skill. Like when you watch it happen and it's good catch and good throwing, but it's not easy to do. So making like just throwing and catching such a vital part of it. Like instead of saying, I tell youth coaches this all the time, like don't be setting up the field or don't be figuring out what you're going to do for practice or after the game or the starting lineup for tomorrow while kids are throwing down the line. Like you need to be actively down there. And whatever your throwing progression is, I mean, the progressions we've had at West have evolved over time. And, now we just try to keep it as athletic and loose and simple as possible. But just playing good, sound baseball catch, because if you can play catch, that's going to translate to the game. And I have to be down there and I have to be passionate and I have to be on them. I have to give them positive feedback, but I also have to give them like, hey, that's sloppy or that's lazy. Simple, like if the ball gets passed, if you and I are playing catch, Tim, and the ball gets past me, like I actively are yelling that kid's name, like, Tim, run back. Instead of like, because a kid is going to naturally, they're just going to walk after it or kind of loaf after it a little bit because it's just human nature. So if as soon as the ball gets by a kid, I'll actively say their name so they know I'm talking to them. And I encourage our other coaches to do the same, like, run back to to get back to, because that's what you would do in a game. And we have to practice that. So just things like that. So throwing, catching, pitching, catching, and then you're going to do offense or defense, and whatever you do, just trying to maximize repetitions. But I think, that's a key part. And something I didn't do as a young coach that is now in our practice plans, more kind of at the front of it, is base running. Because, as a younger coach, you would probably do base running at the end. And after hearing enough college guys, professional guys speak, base running is so important. Get that extra 90 feet that we put base running when we're doing offense. And even some on defense days, like right after we throw, catch, and do pitching, catching stuff, like that's the next item, because getting that extra 90 feet, moving up into scoring position or scoring from third to home on a pass ball, I feel are really crucial. And I probably didn't spend enough time on that as a young coach. So I guess that kind of gives you a general skeleton of our typical practice plan. But it really comes back to whatever you're doing, do with quality and do with investment, and take an active role as the coach doing it, because we can get pulled in so many directions during a practice that when we're there, let's practice with the kids and be actively engaged with them.
I appreciate that. I think that's one thing coaches always want to know is, how guys run their practice. And right, it's always a lot of variables, right? Are you inside? Are you outside? Do you have a turf field? How much time do you have? I mean, there's, we have all these variables to consider, and then we can make our practice plan. You mentioned a few times that you've changed what you've done over the years. If it's your throwing progression or how you teach a certain skill, like what is something you've done a 180 on? Is there something on the baseball skill wise you've done a 180 on?
It might not be a specific skill. It might be more of a philosophy. So kind of getting back to my younger self, it's like we tend to, as a young coach, we overcoach everything. Like we coach the athlete out of the player a little bit sometimes. And not that we were trying to do that intentionally, like I'm a bad person trying to coach and do this. But there's so much that, like, it's like sometimes you don't know what you don't know when you're first starting off, and you feel like you got to control every aspect of it. And like, you're making sure everyone does this, and this. And I think there's some value to that to some degree, but letting the kid be an athlete, letting them figure things out. Their body, a lot of times, will naturally figure it out if we just allow them to do that. So I try now more not to overcoach. I mean, if you were with me with throwing progression in 1998, and then now fast forward to this season, 2021, there's going to be some similar things like, hey, he was doing that in 1998. He still does that a little bit here, but now getting them to be more relaxed, more athletic, letting them figure things out, and understanding that every person's body, I don't have to throw the ball right at the 12 o'clock release. Maybe I'm at 1, 2, or 3, depending on the athlete or depending on the throw in the game. So maybe not being as maybe cookie cutter robotic as maybe I was early on, and now just allowing some freedoms. And maybe that's kind of the circle of life a little bit too, because if you looked at the rules I used to have to what I have now, maybe that's just me as growing. But I feel like so much we coach the athlete out of the kid a little bit sometimes because, oops, your foot wasn't right at that perfect angle, or your hand wasn't perfectly over your glove doing an infield drill. So just allowing them to be more relaxed and free and loose, because if they get stiff, they get slow. If they're overthinking, they get slow. So just trying to kind of make it as simple as we possibly can, but there's still some key elements along the way that we want to kind of make sure we check the box on.
Well, with that transition, was there a moment that stands out to you, like a linchpin moment that you said, yeah, we got to reconsider how we do things? Was there a speaker you heard? Was there interaction you had with another coach or a player? Or is that something just organically over time that you've changed?
I think it's a little of both, but like in the last few years, I kind of laugh at myself now a little bit. Like I never thought I'd be as actively involved on Twitter. Like I don't tweet a lot. I retweet a lot, but I watch a lot of stuff. And probably the two guys that I actively work with now the most are national infielding guys. One guy's name is Nate Trotsky. He was born in Iowa. He's from California now. He works a lot of high level area code games. He works professional baseball. He spends a ton of the time. He's been going to the Dominican Republic working with infielders for a long time. So I use a lot of Nate's stuff, and then Trent Mongero, who's a high school coach in Georgia. So those two guys kind of are partnered together, and they speak a lot, in these kind of virtual Zoom meetings and presentations, and they are always like tweeting things out, whether they're drills or just kind of messages. So the two of them, I basically would follow them on Twitter, and then one day I just said, hey, why don't I just reach out to these people on Twitter, right? Like I can talk to them. I can send them a direct message. So I reached out to Nate, and then he messaged me back, and I'm thinking, well, that's kind of cool. Like, and then we developed kind of some dialogue, and we've had some phone conversations now. So that's probably been the last few years. And one of the things they say, because these guys work with, tons of athletes, especially Nate, like he works with people all over the world, on infield play. And that's the onest thing he said. And he said he is guilty of it as well, as just sometimes we coach the athlete out of the kid. Like we're trying to like control every part of the swing or every part of the throw or every part of the pitch, instead of let the body figure it out, because the body will do what it should naturally do a lot of times if we allow it. And then just maybe being there to kind of guide and to kind of like say, hey, did you ever think about this? And not saying like, do this, like, did you ever think about this? Or, hey, can I offer you a suggestion? Like here's one thing I would suggest, instead of saying, no, you must do it this way kind of thing. So I guess I've changed my way I teach and evolve, and not that I've become like this soft person or whatever, but I look at things differently now and try to meet the kid where he's at, where when I started off, I was probably trying to get them to meet me where I'm at, which I think was okay at that time, because it was a little bit different time. Like kids were more of like, hey, tell me what to do and I'll do it, where it's not like that as much. So now I guess I've evolved to that a little bit more, where I just a little more relaxed. I'm still intense. I still yell. I'm still very passionate at practice and in games, but it's how I approach the athlete, like to make them a better baseball player, I guess I give them a little bit more choice, a little more wiggle room within the foundation of whatever concepts that we're trying to teach.
I'm glad you went there, because like baseball Twitter can be beautiful and it can be ugly, right? And I think if you use it for the right reasons, like you mentioned before, following those two guys, like they've built this brand where, I mean, if you talk to any baseball coach who's probably into self-improvement, into improving their infield play, especially, they've come across those guys and you can't not watch, right? So, like, that's a good segue. Like, what else? How else do you learn? Like, what else are you into recently? Maybe that's helped you improve, that you maybe push out to your coaches. Is it podcasts? Is it books? Is there something on Twitter? Is there other accounts that you enjoy and get a lot of development from?
Yeah, so actually a new thing that we're going to be implementing, it'll be the first time ever in 2021 here. I actually learned from another coach, another coach from a different sport, and completely different type of athlete in some cases. So our head girls basketball coach at West, his name is Mark Busalacci, and Mark has been there. I don't know how long he's been at West, but it's got to be close to, I would say, 8 to 10 years now. And I have 3 daughters, and my 3 daughters play volleyball. And as a coach, I guess my head's always on coaching, right? Like when I go watch my kids play, yes, I want to see them play well, but I'm watching how are these volleyball coaches coaching athletes and stuff. And something came up basically about a year ago. I was at a volleyball match for one of my kids, and parents were kind of raving about, like, the culture of the girls basketball program. And to some people, they might just kind of like, it goes in one ear, one out there. But I started hearing like West parents of our girls basketball program talking about the culture, like how great it was and how positive. And like my radar went up, and I was like, okay, well, that's really good. So that, sometimes you don't hear about that from a parent group. Like sometimes parent groups, you might just hear about like, my kid's not playing, this or that about the coach. But like when I heard like the culture is really good there, and I heard it from more than one parent, I was like, okay, well, what's going on? So during the pandemic, from March to like May, I had reached out to Mark, the girls' coach, and we did a Zoom meeting. And I said, okay, what do you do? And basically, it's a book I'm reading over break right now. It's called Tribal Leadership, and it talks about one of the basic concepts is there's different levels of groupings or tribal leaders at each group, like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and stage 5. And it kind of ties into things we're already doing. Like, it's about we, not me. It ties right into that. And it's about taking whatever stage each person's at, getting them to the next stage up. And sometimes we, as adults and as kids, we get to one stage, and that's where we stay, and we never get to that next stage. And so I'm just in the midst of reading that right now. Mark was gracious enough to share all of his stuff with me, like his PowerPoints that he uses for the girls program. And we're going to use that. I'm tweaking it, obviously, to make it baseball and make it our own, but with the same concepts of tribal leadership now. And it's really good. I'm just getting into the book now, but we're going to implement it for this year. So that's one way that I'm always like trying to grow and get better. But what I do know is, like, now reading the book, it's sometimes you're like, duh, like why didn't I do this before? Like this is really good, but maybe I didn't have the lens for it, 10 years ago. And now, like, I look at it differently and think like this could be really good for our kids, not only baseball wise, but for life, because in the book they talk about like stage 5. Most people don't get to 5. That would be like Google, those high level companies that might get to that point. But most high school athletes and most adults are at 3, where it's like, I'm better than you. That's kind of the stage. I'm better than you. I'm going to show you I'm better than you because I can do X, Y, and Z, where we want to get to that stage 4 where it's about we and it's about us and it's about doing things collectively better as a group instead of where we all get stuck in stage 3. I'm better than you and I'm going to show you why I'm better than you and here's what I've done that's better than you. So that's kind of the part of the book I'm at right now. But that's one way where I'm evolving and our program's evolving. I think it's going to be really good for our kids.
Great. Well, yeah, I'm excited to hear about that as well. I'm sure I'll reach out to you privately, after you finish. But a couple more questions for you. I guess it's the old Brian Cain question. It's the $1 million question he asked on his podcast. What do you know now that you wish you knew back in, the mid to late 90s when you were getting started?
Yeah. I guess what I would wish I would know is, you don't have to prove yourself in one game, one season. Back then it was just like, do you even have to prove yourself? I guess that's kind of human nature, because back then it was just like, I want them to make sure like they made the right decision in hiring me. And, like now I look back and whatever you do, whether you're there for 5 years, 10 years, or I'm blessed to be there now 24 seasons, control what you can and make a positive difference. So I guess how I would look back is I would tell myself to be more relaxed. I don't know if that was possible then. Not trying to control every possible thing, like allowing things to just kind of naturally happen a little bit sometimes. And I'm not saying be laid back or lazy or undisciplined, none of that. It's just being more forgiving of yourself, more understanding that, hey, whatever you're doing, whatever your philosophy is, give it time to grow, give it a chance. It's not going to happen instantly. So I guess if I look back, I would just say, be more relaxed. No matter how long you're there for the right reasons. You love the game. You love teaching kids. So whether you're there 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, you're going to make a positive difference. Maybe that doesn't show up in wins and losses, but at the end of it, does that really matter? Like if I don't win a state championship, yes, I want to win a state championship badly. I want our kids, I want our program to win a state championship. But if we don't, have we failed? And the answer, of course, is no. I mean, there's so many great coaches that never reached that pinnacle. And then there's some that have won multiple. So it's like, get as far as you can get and do the best you can. And at the end of it, if you had great intentions, which we all do, then whatever happens, happens.
I'm glad you said that. I mean, I know a lot of coaches, and I don't want to speak for you here, but I think we try to validate ourselves with wins. Right? You're looking for external validation at times, and maybe not right now at this point in your career, but at some point. And maybe I'm overstepping here, but maybe if you left Stevens Point or left Capco, after another state tournament appearance, and you thought, we failed, we got here again and didn't, win the final game. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, at the time, it's like when you're there and in the moment, you're thinking like, oh, what could I have done differently as a coach? And could if we did 10 more infield reps, would that have made the difference? And I've come to learn that so much has to go right to even get to the state tournament, let alone to win a state championship, that it's not like, oh, if I would have done 10 more reps, or if I would have lost 1 more hour of sleep diagramming a new infield drill or outfield drill, that would have been the secret ingredient. I mean, there has to be some good blessings go your way. Some people would say good luck. I usually count them as blessings that have to go your way to win, just any game sometimes, let alone a sectional game to get to the state tournament, or at the state tournament to win a state championship. So I guess I've come to realize that you're right. Do we want to win? Yes, we do. Do we want to win as much as possible? Of course we do. We're all competitors, but at the end of it, it's not going to be about the number of wins I had. It's going to come back to the kids the lives I've touched. And it's, you hope by the end of it that you've made such a positive influence on so many lives that's the biggest win. And that's kind of my mentality now. Yes, I still want to do all those things, and I'd like to, I want to coach as long as I can. Like, I'm 51, and like people say, well, when do you think it's going to be enough? And I feel like, to me, it's like coaching baseball is like fishing or like hunting, like if you fish and hunt, you say, well, when I'm 60, I'm done fishing, well, I coach baseball. This is what I do. So this is kind of my fishing or my hunting. And I plan on coaching as long as I can, and I have the health to do so. So I don't have a timeline, to end it.
Oh, that's powerful stuff. Okay, you've given us so much. Like, leave us with some advice. Veteran coaches, young coaches, anyone who's listening, what advice would you pass on?
Yeah, for young coaches, I would say, embrace the hard work. I feel like when I was a younger coach, there were like, and even you with Tim, our age difference is a little bit. It's just that people were passionate about coaching. Young coaches, I feel like, sometimes give up on it too early. Like, not that they don't always have the drive, but they might have a bad experience or some challenging parents or challenging whatever the variable is, and then they just stop and get out of coaching. So I guess to young coaches, embrace those challenges, embrace the hard work. The coaches that are maybe in that middle part of their career, they're 10, 15 years in, I would say to them, keep pushing yourself to grow. Like, you can always learn more, like, I never thought I'd be on Twitter, but like now I am. It's just like things like that, just simple things. It doesn't have to be like a huge thing. And then for veteran coaches, like, enjoy the ride a little bit too, because we've put in our time, we've done this stuff, but enjoy the ride a little bit. Like, sometimes we get stuck in things like, oh, like I said, we haven't won a state championship, so I must be terrible, right? You're not terrible. You just, it hasn't gone that way yet. But just like enjoy what you've done. Like, see kind of the fruits of your labor, so to speak. Like, you've impacted a lot of people, and most of those people you've impacted in a positive way. Hopefully all of them, but not everyone always agrees with us, right? So I like to say, like, we've impacted a lot of people. Like, be proud of that, and that can be your state championship a lot of times.
Holy cow! Now, did you hear that? That really perked my ears up as I think about how many of us coaches, myself included, that have yet to win a state championship. And I know we hope that we do one day, and we're always pushing the needle and pushing our players and pushing ourselves. And I mean, when you think about it, what it really means, you're starting to hear why Coach Montez is who he is. And the way guys talk about him as a leader, as a man, as a coach, as a leader of baseball across our state. Now, on a personal note, I was 24 years old. I got the head baseball coaching job at Catholic Memorial High School in Waukesha. One of the first guys I reached out to was Coach Montez. And I was young, arrogant, thought I knew everything. I thought me just showing up would, change the program. And I quickly realized I didn't know very much. And, even to this day, consider him a friend and a mentor. And I just really appreciate him, taking time out of his day to jump on with us today. Just one more reminder to subscribe and share and pass this stuff along to other coaches. I mean, just the content that these guys share. I mean, I take, pages and pages of notes and just think about, well, here's what West is doing, and here's what Burlington's doing, and all these other programs that we're diving into. So anyways, appreciate your time. Hope you tune in next week, and have a good rest of your day.